Okay. No one. No. Okay, we are back, on budget information. And, we are going to, sorry, I'm just trying to download my document. We are going to be moving back to, the Department for Children and Families in the, Child Development Vision.
Thank you. We have some information, and follow up from our conversation yesterday. So First Children's Finance, who did the rate study, or the cost of care study that was very recently published, like last week. They found some number with the caveat that, they haven't had time to fully analyze this as closely as they would like to, but have determined that a 5.5% increase to the reimbursement rate for infants and toddlers would bring that reimbursement in line with the cost of care, current cost of care. So it would reduce that gap that we saw in the cost of care study between older schoolers and infants and toddlers. So we are recommending an increase to the base, not an increase in the base, but not
An increase to the
Yeah.
rate.
to the rate of 5.5%, which by our calculations is about 5.87 million. And that has not been verified by the JFO yet. No one's working on it.
Okay, so I have a question because the law says that we can,
We can go up
up to 1.5 times
which is
the NACE code.
6.15.
Right, I have that. So what calculation is what you just recommended?
So that calculation is 5.5%, which is what you asked yesterday, is
Okay.
what would get us to cover the cost of care.
Okay,
Which is
5 point,
lower than, 5.5.
okay, that's 5.5%. Okay.
And that's in the governor's proposal.
The governor is recommending we reduce the base, and we're saying don't reduce it by this amount for this one line item, and then there's others that we talked about yesterday.
Okay, so,
I'm gonna send this to you.
Yeah. yeah, I'm just making my notes in my final doc, so
Sure.
that I know what's coming. Okay. So that'd be a 5.5%.
For just infants and toddlers.
I get that, just infants and toddlers. And the dollar amount associated with that is what?
5.872612.
5, 8, say it again.
72
Mhm.
612.
Okay,
Not confirmed by JFO yet.
got it.
587,261.
5,872,612.
Okay, and so, we know that there are significant gaps in the infant and toddler care due to the, ratio.
Yes.
And that's required, higher staff to,
Infant.
infant toddler ratio is required for that age group. And, our current statutory language permits reimbursement rate increases up to 1.5 times the most recent annual increase in the NAICS code, which I don't remember what it stands for, but it's, pardon,
The NICS codes?
NAICS.
Yeah,
is
that's
that
the
called?
NICS codes, they're labor codes.
Okay, thank you. With regard to education services. So the increase that Ray just spoke of at 5.5%, is, within that range that's allowed in the statute. So that's what I'm just trying to get to, I
Yes.
guess. Okay, and it does not exceed that. Okay.
And it doesn't impact the whole population.
A portion of the population. Yeah. Do we have any idea? I'm sorry to
How
ask this
many
question.
kids?
How many kids that is?
Yes. So there's 1,789 infants and 1,410 toddlers. Amazing that I have that. Thank you.
I didn't even, can you say the numbers again? What?
1,789
Uh-huh.
infants.
Infant,
These
okay.
are infants that receive CCFAP.
Yes.
And 1,410 toddlers.
Okay. Okay. Any questions on that in terms of just understanding what it is? We're not voting on anything yet. Okay. We had another children's integrated services. I had a question about that.
No, I gave you that, you asked when the last time that they had increases, and it was SFY 22 was the last year that an increase was provided, and that went from 600 to 650. I think that was the question. But we answered that yesterday.
No, I had a question about the 450,000, if that is, how much of that is general fund and how much of it is global commitment? Some of those kids
Oh,
are Medicaid
I'm
eligible.
sorry, I didn't catch that question yesterday.
Okay, so if you can
Yeah, I will
find that out.
find that out.
So some of the students there are not
Right, some are
eligible
not
for Medicaid,
Medicaid, some
but
are.
others, and those are required EPSDT services, early periodic
Yeah.
screening, diagnosis, and treatment. If we can break that out, that would be helpful. Thank you. And then on the Building Bright Futures.
Yeah.
I need the.
These are all B13, B318.
These are all
Everything in
B318.
CDD is B318.
18, okay, all right, thank you. Okay, let's see if I have any there. I don't have it. Do you have anything else?
I don't have anything else to share. I will get that breakdown.
Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so does anybody else have any for their, units, any other budget or dollar updates that we haven't discussed already? Dan, I'm looking at you because I feel like I need something from you and I'm trying to remember what it is.
So
It's something we
Nolan
talked about,
has
but I
given me
can't-
some information this morning, which it would be wonderful if I was allowed to phone a friend because
Go
I
ahead, phone a
took
friend.
pictures of it and I'm trying to figure out what.
Join us, Nolan, if you would like. I'd appreciate that.
For the record, I will join fiscal. Question, as I interpret it, was first you wanted to increase the base based on the rate study
Correct,
and then do a 4% on that.
correct.
Right.
So what I did was I looked at the rate study, which was from 2023, and it focuses on adult day, choices for care, ACCS, and ERC 123.
Mhm.
And just for those, to bring, just according to the report based on the 23 numbers, to bring that base up for those folks was 30.8 million. So I added the 30.8 million to the base, under the current base, and then I took a 4% off of that.
So some of those rates we increased in 23. Like ACCS, I think we put the whole 13 million in to bring that base up.
So I could take that off.
I'm just trying to figure out like how I track that down. Exactly what we put in. I mean, I have a pretty good idea. And so that's where. Because what I have for ERC is 3.8 general fund.
That's what you put in, or that's,
but I think we put some percentage in.
So do we have to have another offline conversation so we don't do math in public?
Okay. Thank you. Yes. That would be wonderful.
That sounds like a good idea.
Otherwise, everyone's time will.
I'm just trying to figure out the numbers you gave me anyways.
Okay, all right, so, a question for you, for the Dale team
Mhm.
is, because it's a large number and it's not in your recommendation, but it's something that is, significant, I would like to see the, choices for care nursing facility, rate in here, if we could.
Okay. Sorry for the paper noise, but so what you want to see is everything in development for services, but long-term care.
Yeah,
You want to see the long-term care governor recommend in the budget letter.
I do want to see that.
Okay,
Yes.
so do you also want DS services as well? A substantial amount
The
of money.
caseload, yes,
Correct.
yes, the caseload number.
And voc rehab? No, that's not.
No,
nothing there,
there's
never
nothing
mind.
in for both rehab.
TBI.
The caseload, there's a
Caseload.
caseload, yeah.
So those three line items
Yes.
you want in there.
So if you can revise your chart,
Yeah,
and put that in,
okay,
that would be helpful. Well, in particular, because we may have some language about the nursing facility thing, I think that we should show these major elements and
Right.
whether we agree with them or not,
Okay.
because they're significant chunks of money.
fair enough.
Okay?
And I'm not gonna put in veterans home because that's really not.
Yeah,
but
we're
it's
not
in
dealing
this
with it here.
Line item in the budget.
Yeah, they
Okay.
deal with it.
Yep.
I'm not sure
Making
where.
you
but-
don't.
Where do they deal with it? That's
On the website.
Government.
government ops, yeah,
I think so.
okay. Okay,
I'll check in with the chair.
okay, so you'll do a revision to your chart
Mhm.
that I have, okay, that'd be
Mhm.
great.
And I have some language that I would like to put in explaining our number 1 and 1A, or our two number ones.
I've combined them, just so you know, in the document that I'm working on into one thing,
Then I will combine them in mine.
okay?
Okay.
Okay, let us take a look at language. I feel like we're gonna need just so you know where I'm going with this, I should give you some idea, right? Where I'm going with this is I have, got it about halfway done, a compilation of all of what you all have, put out there, so that we can see it all in one document and we can make some decisions, within each of those things about our recommendations, as a committee. I have the recommendations as submitted by the teams, but then our recommendations as a committee, in terms of what we see as, highest priority, high priority, and then be nice to have kind of thing. You are probably going to have a little bit of free time to continue to work on that, because I'm going to need to continue to work on this so that we can come back and look at the whole thing together. But let us take a look at language right now. And I'm going to go in reverse order since Jubilee had to wait so long to do her side. You have all of yours in one, which is very helpful.
In one email, yeah.
In one email, yeah.
Three attachments, one.
Okay, which would you like to start with?
Okay, just a second. All language, one email. I'm going to start with the one that's first, Housing Opportunity Grant Program.
Okay, and there is additional language, like the chair alluded to, that we'll have to review then, but kind of directing the department to prioritize utilizing in-state organizations, companies, and their operations. But this language is just of the funds appropriated to the Housing Opportunity Grant Program pursuant to, Section X for now. This act, 2 million of one-time funding shall be utilized for the partial replacement of community-based positions
previously funded through the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. I did get information. I am not sure what they were talking about when they mentioned other things being funded, like providing financial assistance. I have the awards, and there's financial management. There's a little chunk of it was used for like financial management services, and that's like coaching and working on budgeting. But it's all services. The only thing is possibly there was money left unspent and they used it in other ways. But the ask and the recommendation, that is all services. And most, if not all of ERAP was services.
Okay, I'm thinking we need to be a little bit more specific when we say community-based positions.
Okay.
I think we need, and I realize that different agencies call them different things, but,
Yeah, here, we can list out 1 second.
okay,
In the award summary, has a nice list of them.
okay,
Housing navigation services, housing retention services, landlord outreach and education, legal services to help prevent evictions, and credit repair and money management services.
okay. So, so I think we should, be specific
Okay,
about that.
I will.
That language. And so, I want to make sure that people understand what this language is, and let me back up. So there's multiple pieces of the state's budget. So for people going through this for the first time, there is, all of what we've been doing has been, in the B sections of the budget. Okay, so that's the appropriations made for general state government and the different services. There is an 1100 section that is one-time allocations, and you will see some of our budget, for instance, in DCF is in that 1100 under the general assistance for emergency housing is in that. Actually, the biggest chunk is in that one-time section.
Get a copy of that.
You have a copy of it.
The 1100?
Yep, it's right in the budget document.
Oh, it's right in the, okay.
It's right, you just have, it's at the end. If you look at the spreadsheet, those,
Kind of concentrated just on ours.
yeah, you can look at, if you look at the spreadsheet where you got that, where you
Where I
got
got
your
my
section, right, and you look all the way at the 1100s are at the end.
Okay, thank you.
So that is, I lost my train of thought now.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, I'm just trying to explain to people what, what we're doing with this language. So there's the budget aspects of it, okay? And then there is what we call language that will refer back to, not all, but some of the different budget line items when there's special things to take into consideration. In this particular, the language that we're looking at now, what we are saying, what we are proposing, what is being proposed by the team looking at this program is that there is already $2 million of money in one time that the administration has requested. And we are saying a specific use of that one time. That's what this recommendation is about. So we have the loss of essentially people who serve all those things that Jubilee just said. They're all one form or another of service coordination, case management type services. So what we are saying is that, and the other thing that I'm encouraging people to do is to be thinking how we are moving from where we are now to what we will eventually end up with in our temporary emergency shelter bill, okay? So these folks have served essentially in a case management function, a service coordination and case management function for the housing program. And so we are saying we're not adding any money here in this particular language. This is money that the governor included in his budget. We are saying utilize this money for these positions. Otherwise, those positions are going to be lost because the money that has been associated with them is leaving. We're saying we're recommending, that's what's being recommended by the team, that this is a high priority recommendation to, at a minimum, keep this level of position. And I think you have additional language that comes after this. So was that clear as mud to everybody?
I understand.
Okay.
I wrote it down.
Got it.
Okay. So we're not adding money to the budget with this. We are saying with this $2 million that you put in the recommend, this is how we believe that it should be utilized. Okay, that's the recommendation that's coming.
And I just made that request for the addition of those services being listed out.
Okay. And then, so what I just recommended was that we be specific, instead of just saying community-based positions, so that we understand and that the people who read this budget, who are the people who are service providers, understand what this money is specifically for. And you said that there was going to be something else added to this besides that change?
Yes, I don't have that yet. And that is just directing the department to prioritize using in-state.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That'll be another,
that'll be a
separate
separate
piece
thing of
piece.
language that I'll send out as soon as I
Yeah.
have.
Okay, so this is the first time we're talking about language. So this is a time to have feedback and input because we're going to be needing, as we move through this, to move that this section probably has the most language. So that's why we're starting with this one. We're going to need to move to decision making as we move through the day. Okay. So if possible, I would like to move to decision making on language as we review the language. Again, this is not adding money to the governor's budget. This is saying with the money that's in the budget, we believe it should be used for these services that are going to end because that temporary program ended. And it's essentially case management type services. And as we look forward to H91 and the need for case management services as people, this has helped people to either find access housing or prevent them from becoming homeless in the first place. So that's what the recommendation is for this. Thoughts, questions, discussion?
Quick iteration or clarification. Was that just nondescript in the governor's budget? What was the category it was
It's
targeted for?
targeted under shelter expansion as they confirmed yesterday, and then I did hear back from Lily today confirming that they have it targeted as shelter expansion. The two shelters that unfortunately doesn't fund a lot, it's expensive. The two Waterbury and Williston have cost over $3 million for December to April. And so we're just the best way to utilizing these funds we have. I mean, losing 33 service provider positions will be catastrophic right now while we have this transition year.
So would that eliminate, what does that do in terms of any shelter expansion resources? If it was taken from that? Is
So
there
there's-
anything else in the budget for
Yes.
shelter expansion?
Well, so shelters expanded this year
Mhm.
and they have moved from one-time dollars that they had into base 3.5, 3.3, something.
Yeah.
They moved that into base to solidify funding for the
3.7.
3.7, thank you. To solidify expansion for what was funded, what was
Right.
begun in FY 25, or actually they're still working on, not complete.
But for additional expansion of shelter capacity?
Right, this does not fund additional expansion. for
This would
shelter
remove the
capacity.
additional expansion
The $2 million.
and put it into
Case
case
management.
management.
Yep. Um, and one of the reasons behind that is as we look to creating, H91, we're looking to, frankly, shrink the number of beds available, but to be able to formalize that service with case management positions that, don't exist right now for essentially people in the hotel service area.
So I mean, I really have an issue with, as I said before, I mean, I think that the kind of fundamental or baseline
Mhm.
should be that there is some kind of a roof available to any Vermonter who would otherwise be on the street. And we don't have enough shelter capacity to do that. And so to take any resources away from building on that shelter capacity, even for an incredibly important piece. I mean, I think we ought to be looking towards a recommendation to preserve resources in this other area rather than taking
Transferring.
money away from what I think is more essential to be funding.
Mhm.
So.
Any other thoughts?
Just musing, it seems to me that, it's very, to understand how this, system would get set up and how it would actually begin to actually work. I'm interested in seeing that we do all we can to get that set up. But I don't quite understand how this, or probably I won't understand much of anything, so we do, so I'll need help, but yeah.
How this supports that? Is
How
that
this
what you-
supports, yeah.
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 I can provide some, I think, some background for that.
Okay.
And so what this is looking to do, as we move forward with 91, and I recognize that, we're going to be doing a strike call and we're going to be doing, essentially a new bill. And that's going to be coming.
Mhm.
And so we're kind of in this in-between spot of some of the, one-time dollars that have been out there being used up and going away, okay? And then at the same time, looking towards the transition to a more permanent program that actually does include sort of all levels of shelter, that would address what Ann is talking about. At the same time, and we know within that more case management will be needed.
Mhm.
And so at the same time, we're looking at what is the priority to maintain versus having to cut in other areas, or to choose where we make the investment. And so this is one of those places where we'd be choosing where we make the investment.
Yes.
The 2 million, I want to point out in the governor's budget is one-time dollars. Okay, and so similar, they had one-time dollars in last year's budget that they are now converting to permanent base funding for the shelters that have been developed in the meantime. So I think we also have to look forward to what is it that we're going to need on an ongoing basis, on a permanent ongoing basis. And, honestly, we haven't really heard from the department. What's your end game on shelters? How many shelters does the state need and what locations? Do we have sufficient locations in Chittenden County, but we need more in the Northeast Kingdom,
Timeline.
It's right. It's been a bit piecemeal, I'm just, going to say. So I think that what this recommendation from the team is saying that with the additional shelters that we have, doesn't mean that we have sufficient number of shelters, but it's also saying we need to preserve the folks who are working to find permanent housing for people on an ongoing basis. And so it's a statement about, which, it's not saying one necessarily is more important than the other. It's just, they're both important. Yeah, we got Dan and then
Yeah,
we
just,
got Julie.
So if we were to make this change or propose this change, what would be the shelter capacity moving forward? Like, what's the capacity?
Yeah, that's a good
Because
question.
it's
We should
not
get that.
all the money there still will be shelters.
Yes, no, this is.
This is expansion.
This is
of
expansion.
shelters.
Yeah.
And so,
Do you have that information?
Just under 600 shelter beds right now,
okay,
500 something.
They're
We
adding,
have a number in process from what the
Correct.
expansion that the money we put, we
Mhm.
haven't seen those. So those are in process still. So there will be a shelter expansion actually happening this year from those funds. So we'll see more shelter. There's different reports. I can find it. I have too many windows open right now, but, can give you an idea of what that looks like.
so just for some real simple clarification, so let's say there's capacity right now for 500 shelter beds in Vermont, roughly, right?
yeah, there's more
And
than
so,
that, yeah.
okay, 600,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So what the governor's proposing is to expand the shelter beds by $2 million worth of more shelter beds. But what we're saying
They
is,
don't say how many. You don't know.
correct,
Right,
2 million more. That's why I just used.
Yeah, I know.
So expand it by $2 million more. But what we're saying is a better investment would be to move that money into case management and work with the capacity that is online or coming online based on past investments that still haven't been totally deployed. So moving forward in FY 26.
And the hotel motel,
In the hotel
People.
motel, but also in shelters.
also in
Yeah,
shelters.
these
is
services
shelter.
work, it's shelters, these positions, it's, people are homeless, whether they're in a shelter or they're in GA, and these are the services
Right,
that, we can have all the shelter we want. If we don't have people supporting
right.
the people in them, they can't make that
Transition out of it,
transition.
yeah.
We are already struggling. There is not enough of a workforce. We don't have enough of these positions currently. This is just recognizing that we really can't stand to lose 33 more positions.
And do you envision
I just want to
Okay.
make a point. This $2 million
Mhm.
does not maintain all 30, what'd you say, 30?
33.
Because there's an additional recommendation to fund the balance. So we've kind of divided it. The 2 million that's in the governor's budget,
Mhm.
maintaining some of those positions, and then
Yeah,
the
an additional
additional
1.75.
1.7 to fully fund what the current positions are.
So do you envision these case managers working with people that are unsheltered as well?
They work with people who are unsheltered, people who are
Right,
sheltered, people
unsheltered.
who are walking in off the street and
Correct.
need a place to stay.
Okay.
Yeah, it's.
So they
it's all
could
of the
direct
above.
them to shelters, whether they're hotel or like in Waterbury.
Yeah, I mean, these are the people working directly with individuals.
Yeah, and if someone's unsheltered during supportive services, like the first thing you're going to work with them on Housing Navi is their basic immediate
Right.
needs. So that's, if they're, sometimes that's, it's always like a step up on those kind of basic human needs. So that is obviously a first priority. If they're unsheltered, it kind of depends where they are.
Just putting more capacity into case management to help individuals.
It's not more, it's maintaining.
Maintaining.
Yeah,
Maintain.
it's
Okay,
maintaining.
thank you for that.
So, Judd.
And only maintaining this, I'm sorry, it's only maintaining in this $2 million, a portion of the workforce.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm going to try another way to make sure I understand it.
Yeah.
So what the governor is recommending is that we would increase the number of shelter spaces, beds, but not increase supports for these people.
It would be cutting.
It would be cutting.
We're actually cutting
Yeah,
those. So,
cutting
yeah, so
support.
I see.
And
Okay.
it, yeah, I'll be honest, to my estimation, it doesn't make sense to increase the number of beds without the support services. So at this point in time, given that we do have more shelter beds coming online and that we're looking at developing a integrated program between community-based shelters, emergency shelters in hotels, and what you might call a congregate shelter for people who have nothing, that sort of continuum. For my way of thinking, it didn't make sense to lose the people who are helping folks in that system. So that's.
Can I add my thing I was gonna say after Dan?
Yeah.
And just want to point out, these are people who are employed in the workforce. It takes months to hire for a position in this field right now. So to lose those 33 positions, and then if down the line with this program, we have funding to do that, it is going to take months to fill those positions. So not only do we have that year in, whatever we decide on, we would then have all of those months for them to hire and fill in those positions going forward.
So it maintains the workforce essentially.
So that's kind of was also my point, was that like this $2 million would have a much more immediate impact than to continue the case management supportive services rather than to increase shelters. Acknowledging that both are needed, but the more immediate
Trying to
impact would
prioritize, I
be
guess, is putting.
with helping folks to get the support that they need so they can find success.
We are in dire need of both.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, what this ends up doing is, appropriations has asked us to prioritize, and this is the recommendation coming from your team on that. Yeah. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I would just chime in with belief that we shouldn't be putting further fractures in the system we're trying to build out. If we don't if we don't dedicate the $2 million towards these folks who are already doing the work we hope to build out from on H91, we're just setting ourselves back steps before we move forward.
Before we move forward.
It doesn't make,
It's a good one to me too.
That's well put. Better than I said. Yeah, go ahead.
So I am not in support of cutting back essential positions, but to me, it's a question of where the recommendation for funding comes. And I can't support removing proposed funding that's been identified for increasing shelter beds. But I think it kind of, for me, it goes sort of to the bigger question of what we mean in communicating to the Appropriations Committee, recommendations versus priorities versus, meeting the needs of Vermonters. And I've kind of always understood that what we're communicating is we're identifying what the needs, what would be needed to fully support the human service network in Vermont. And then within that, the priorities, recognizing that all of this becomes to the extent funds are available. Because I wouldn't ever be in the place of recommending all of the things that we're identifying, because I don't think we all have different perspectives on what kind of resources can or should be available. But our job as human services is to identify this is what the full needs would be if the money was available. This may sort of sound backwards, but I think this is shortchanging what we're supposed to be communicating if we're taking away $2 million from needed shelter expansion. I think we also need those positions. I think that's part of a recommendation that we need this additional money if we are to have a full support of the human service needs of Vermonters. Then in terms of whether that particular 2 million should stay in the governor's versus backfill for money we don't have for these positions, that becomes a question of prioritization.
So I want to make sure that I am understanding what you're saying, Anne. that, so I think that probably everybody agrees that we continue to need additional shelter capacity. Although they haven't identified where or what, yet, but we know we have lots of unhoused people, so.
Right.
So I think what I'm hearing you say is that, we should be identifying, the additional needed capacity that's necessary. And I do feel that appropriations is asking us to say in addition to that. So I don't disagree with you. I agree with you that we should be putting, so it's not that we don't need more shelter capacity. I understand what you're saying. They will then ask, well, what is our priority? And so then so let's just say we have $2 million, what would be our priority? And, maybe that's a question that we should be looking at as a separate question. So
As the bigger.
listing both.
Cause I'm
Well, it's a big-
perfectly happy to do
No.
2 million for shelter expansion
Well,
and
well, that's what I mean.
3.75
Is
Yeah, I understand what you're
Yeah,
saying.
I think
get it
the
as well.
context of this should be, this would be language that would identify at the priority identification, that if in fact there isn't
I
the
hear
money
you.
for the added positions, then the recommendation, and I'm not agreeing with that recommendation, but the
No, I
recommendation
understand.
would be that the positions are more important than the shelter bed expansion.
Right. Right. Okay. So for the purposes of this, I hear what you're saying. I think that we should have both here. And then because I can tell you that when I go testify in appropriations, they're going to ask me.
Right. You can't
what
have
I
all this.
right, What
You
I- what
can't
I'm
have it all.
recommending, or
Right.
what our committee is recommending. So,
Right.
are people in general understanding about what this whole conversation was just about? Okay, so rather than saying the 2 million that is in the budget right now for shelter expansion, rather than saying, okay, well, we're prioritizing maintaining existing case management staff over shelter expansion, we're saying what is being suggested is we're saying that we should present both needs and say, yes, the $2 million is necessary in shelter expansion, and we need to maintain, it's actually 3.75 because there was a separate
Put it
item.
at 3.75.
3.75 to maintain existing case management positions that are serving those various functions that you mentioned.
But
That's what this discussion was all about.
And then the committee's recommendation may be if,
When we
in
see
terms
this all-
of priority.
Yeah, which is a higher priority.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Zon.
That was my initial.
Yeah, no. Zon.
One quick
Zon.
question is,
And,
if we're going to talk
yeah.
about adding a shelter bed capacity, then if we also say, but we want to maintain prior supports, won't we need additional supports for added capacity, add bed capacity? And shouldn't we, in the same line, should we look toward that?
Well, what this anticipates, frankly, is that next year they will be submitting a budget request for supporting this on for any expanded
see.
shelter capacity on an ongoing basis.
I see.
That's kind of how it's worked in DCF. Yeah.
Thank you.
Doug.
I guess I was just going to speak again to the prioritization of the positions, because if those individuals in their capacity are doing what we hope and believe they're doing, they're keeping people out of homelessness.
Mhm.
So, being completely unsheltered. So if we didn't have these positions, we'd actually be potentially creating greater pressure on the population size of those people.
Well, so I think for the purposes of our final, the next version that we're going to look at on this, why don't we have two? So maintain the current language. Well, I guess we don't have any language on that.
I can look and see if there's something in the governor's recommendation.
Okay, and then add the language, then sort of consolidate instead of having two pieces, this and then the other 1 point, whatever it is, to maintain the case management function. And then we're not voting on this right now. This is just, okay, so we're gonna move on because we got a lot of stuff to cover.
Let's just say.
Next.
We can't spend this much time on every one of these.
Well, this is a complicated one because we've heard lots of testimony. The others will be more straightforward, I think. Hopefully.
Okay, what's next?
Okay, reach up rateable reduction.
Okay.
Oh, and you actually don't have a dollar amount in the budget part, do we yet?
No.
No.
I,
Yeah. Okay, so let me just give a little bit of background on this for people who aren't accustomed to. Reach Up is a program for low-income individuals with children and periodically, I can't remember how often it's done, maybe Ann remembers, the Joint Fiscal Office issues a report saying essentially what's that report called? Thank you, the Basic Needs Report. And then the percentage of that, so that's the basic needs says, for family size in certain parts of the state, this is how much it takes for basic needs, shelter, food, basics, just the basics. So Reach Up is a program that assists extremely low income families with children to have assistance with basic shelter and food and things like that. And so we determine what it takes. Joint Fiscal Office undertakes this on is it every 2 years, 3 years, 2 years? Every 2 years. And then we have insufficient funds to fund that for people who are eligible. And so we do what's called a rateable reduction. Rateable reduction is less than 50% right now. It's at 49.6. Is that right? So let's just use round numbers. So if we say that it takes $10,000, or I'll use 1,000 a month. Let's just say we take 1,000 a month. The rateable reduction says you will receive $490.60 or some 490, whatever the math
Whatever the
turns out to be.
rateable reduction is.
we're not doing math on.
We're not doing math on Zoom, yeah. That's a good reminder, thank you. So the legislature commissioned a report 2 years ago now. I think it's 2 years ago.
First.
So what we're saying is to, instead of reducing it down to 49.6, we would only reduce it. This is where I was kicking.
50.6%. It's so, because it's reduction, but you're reducing the reduction, which actually
Right.
makes it bigger and
Right,
it's.
Right, okay, so to increase the rate of reduction, instead of from 50.6, we'd move it to 51. It's 1%. Essentially, that's whatever the language is, it's 1%. And
1% of what?
1% of the calculation for the basic needs budget.
So a family is going to get 1% more.
That's the bottom line, is that a family would get 1% more. So the whole this whole process says, okay, for your basic needs, I'm talking about basics. We're not talking about extras like cable and things like that. We're talking about basics. For individuals with children who meet the qualifications in Reach Up, the proposal here is to increase that by 1%, essentially. And we don't know what the dollar amount.
That's the governor's proposal.
No, this is the proposal from the team that reviewed DCF, Economic Services, and Office of Economic Opportunity. So what you can see it right at the top. It says McGill Cole, right at the top.
Oh, McGill and Cole's recommendation.
That's their recommendation to our committee. We don't know how much this is yet. So we frankly don't need to spend a lot of time on it yet, because we're trying to figure out the numbers. Okay. It's the concept of saying state government says it takes this in order to have a basic existence in Vermont. A basic existence.
Yes.
Okay. And we say we have insufficient money in order to do that. So we're only going to fund that at 49.6%. And this proposal says we should fund that at 50.6%.
Madam Chair,
Moving it up.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you mentioned this, because I had to step out, but also passed the bill last biennium that asked the department to actually come up with a plan on reducing this rateable reduction.
Yes.
They give us a plan, but they are not doing anything to implement it.
Yes.
So just want to point that out that.
So that's why we're doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why it's being recommended. I think that we do need to point out that this is something that has passed in policy, as the vice chair just said. But, people make different budget priorities. And so, if we have the numbers to put this in, we'll take a vote on whether we include this or not. We may not, if we don't have the numbers, then it will say X, and if that is approved by majority of this committee. So for right now, let's move on to the next section. So
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Where are we in the cycle of the review from JFO?
I think that was issued last year, so they will be doing another one next year.
Thank you.
Okay, the next, and you all have this language, you got it, okay. The next is, you remember me saying earlier that FY '26 will be a transition year for GA emergency housing because our bill will cover FY '27. So what we need to do in the FY '25 budget, there is extensive language, several pages of language that deals with the GA program for emergency housing for the year that we're in right now. So we need to make sure that there's continuing language for this transition year that we will have next year. And that's what this proposal is.
So this is a 5-page document.
Yes,
Okay. Got it.
It's actually shorter than the budget language from last year. For
yes.
Just making sure I'm looking at the right one.
Last year had a bunch of stuff about the task force and all of that. So it essentially, for folks who were here last year, we worked on a emergency housing bill, and a whole chunk of our bill got put into the budget language with some modifications. And because that bill stayed on the wall in Senate appropriations. And the bill that we are working on right now, H91, will have implementation, we'll have a transition year, and then the implementation wouldn't be until a year out. So for next year, we need to have language that governs the operation of the program. And it's going into what we call session law because it's only good for 1 year. Okay, go ahead.
Doctor. So, you'll see some obvious updates for the year because we're a year later.
Are those obvious because they're yellow?
Yes.
Thank you. Just being clear.
So this is, I think it's important because this is
That's actually-
new. Yeah. So everything that is underlined right here that is not in yellow is existing law in the green books in this year's budget. Okay, so it's not something that's being changed. Everybody clear about that? It's existing.
Yep.
Okay.
I get to be Katie.
Something that's-
So then
No, if you
we,
have a question, go ahead.
Is it- I don't want to get into the difference between green books versus session law. It's session law, right? It's existing session law, or is it existing?
This is existing that's what I just said.
Session law, not
Yeah.
green books. I thought
Not
you said
green
it was in green books.
No.
Oh,
No,
okay, sorry.
session law, session law.
Okay.
Law.
Our next bill.
Right,
Our next-
got it,
yeah.
okay. got it.
Yeah.
Today.
The whole budget's in session.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, unless it specifically says. Okay. All right.
okay, so you will see the first kind of real change is at the top of page 2, B, we added B and then changed the next one to C1. It used to be B1. And this just gets at, we've talked about this before. There's been a lot of back and forth and concern and dialogue around the prioritization. And so this is the department shall provide emergency housing to households with an eligible member pursuant to subsection A of this section on a first come, first served basis and shall not establish priority groups among eligible households. This bill, the eligible households, we have all identified as vulnerable people, and that is why they qualify for this household. And it becomes really difficult. The department tried, and it is really hard. You know, you can make these arbitrary prioritizations, you know, say people over 50 with a disability, but then what if you have a 30-year-old who's in a wheelchair and oxygen, and that means they're not out, they're not in anymore. So we just said the most fair, equitable way to not get into these is just make it be first come, first serve within the eligible categories.
So I just want to provide a little context for this. So this is the language that is in current statute in the session law for the budget. This is in the budget bill right now, okay? Which is H 883 from last year. So no changes are being made to eligibility. I do want to point out for people who weren't here last year that we did change eligibility last year. We narrowed the eligibility, the number of the individuals who are eligible for the hotels and motels. And that gets to Ann's comment early on in the session when we were doing BAA.
I think we expanded them, not narrowed.
No.
I think the ultimate.
I mean, this,
path-
but what I'm talking about, the
Yes.
budget.
Yes,
That's what I'm
budget
talking
as
about.
passed.
Narrowed it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking
From
about.
what we recommend.
Yes. The budget narrowed it and excluded essentially individuals who don't meet any of these criteria. So I just wanted to say that that's existing law. The Department for Children and Families instituted emergency. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the concept of emergency rulemaking, but rulemaking takes an extended period of time of public comment and can be really a year or more in going through the whole process. There's multiple steps in the process. So emergency rulemaking, when we enable emergency rulemaking, we enable the department to sort of bypass a lot of that public comment and input and directly implement rules with the support or not of the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. The Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules have had rules governing this part of the program for several months now. And they have, I think, I don't know if it's this week or not, but they essentially issued a finding that the department's prioritization did not meet legislative intent because there was no prioritization put into the budget bill. So they issued a statement saying that that what the department's doing is not consistent with legislative intent. You know, they've been going back and forth for several months now with the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. And that's what the final determination has been. So the department has actually asked us to be very clear about what we mean here. And so what this essentially does is to set up a capacity, a total program level capacity. It does not, it says all these people are of equal priority. That's essentially what this is saying, and that we work to support people who are homeless until that capacity is full. And then, you know, obviously people continue to be, to work with, but they may not be sheltered in a hotel. So I just wanted to provide that background because it's important for people to understand that this has been going through rulemaking for several months now, and that the department has asked for clarification about what we intend. So this is our attempt at it. Yeah, Ann.
So just, you know, because I don't want to go through all of this line by line,
Yeah.
I have to give a context from last year. And that is, as we worked on our recommendations, I believe that a number of categories were too broad and that we should be defining narrower eligibility. And then all of those eligible, there would be capacity rather than having a broader group and then saying, but some of you don't make it in because we don't have the capacity. Even if we all wanted to, at this point, we can't start over on that. But I don't support this language for this year for the same reason, that without going into the details, for the same general reason, is that I don't, and it's to say it's first come, first served. And if you have a 19-year-old in your family, you are a vulnerable group, and you have an equal access, as, family with a newborn infant, just doesn't work for me.
Area. Any other questions or comments about that particular area? Okay, let's move.
Okay, the next language change, you'll see, it used to mention the 80-day caps, and an 1,100 rooms per night room cap, except for during the cold weather months when it was 14. This is the utilization of hotel and motel rooms pursuant to this subdivision shall be capped at 1,400 rooms per night throughout the fiscal year, including during cold weather months.
Go
ahead.
Can I ask what it is now?
1,400 right now.
It's,
What's
What's the change?
what's the change?
The balance of the year, it's 1,100 during the winter.
Oh, I see, this just for the entire year.
This changes it to 1,400.
So so we just received yesterday, information from DCF that might impact these numbers, and haven't really had a chance to review them yet. But let's just talk about what the concept is. So the concept, and this is, based on testimony and based upon what we are hearing from people who run this program. Well, no, scratch that. I don't know if I've heard that from people who run this program, but is the trauma caused by being homeless, having a place to stay, and then being homeless again, is extensive. And what this is doing is saying, okay, during this interim year, between what we have now and what we are hoping to set up in H91, that we would fund a certain capacity. Don't get stuck on 1,400 rooms or whatever, because those numbers might change. But that we would fund a certain capacity within the dollars that we have, and then people would have some basis for shelter. Again, they would still have to be referred to community-based shelters if there are openings in community-based shelters or other housing that's available. This is, again, as a last resort, and then again, only for that group of people that are currently eligible. It does not address the people that Anne has talked about, which is essentially people who really have no shelter over their head, but don't meet that category. So don't meet those categories that we have there. So it is the concept that we're looking at is trying to keep things as similar as possible to what's happening right now. That's really what we're trying to do to avoid a lot of disruption until we get to the remake of the whole program under H91. So that's the baseline of what this is trying to do. Okay, why don't you keep going?
May I ask a question? If we keep the language of 1,400 year round, there's a financial cost to that. Is that in the? I don't know that we discussed that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to fiddle with things. This was just, we had to do.
It's probably not going to be 1,400.
It'll be below that. Our recommendation is we kind of level fund from last year, the amount in GA. So it would be less than that. We just kind of got information the end of the day yesterday. So we have to sit down and fiddle with that. So we'll have more on the actual number we're going to recommend
later.
With the greater goal of being the consistency throughout the year rather than the up and down of availability, even if it's a lower number.
We've heard testimony that the trauma that's caused by being housed, unhoused,
And you can't ever work on those larger goals because you're in constant, like with their case managers, because you're trying to just focus on that crisis of where am I going to be in 30 days when my days run out? And when you're constantly focused on your immediate needs, it is impossible to be working on your future.
Okay, all right, so move on. I don't know, that's number 3.
And then this one is an
Which
addition.
is this one? I'm sorry. just-
This next, I'm getting number 3. This was an addition, someone added, and so we can leave it in or take it out. Currently, it was not our intent, but it is through, the, rulemaking or not, with the department is making, households, exhaust all of their resources. So if they happen to have $200 in their bank account, they have to spend it before they can to go into this program. So this and does not allow them to save money to save for the future. So this is just requiring that they exhaust all available resources. We hear this line that, oh, well, then, what's going to happen? Someone could have $1 million in the bank. From the same people also talk about how these are horrible places for nobody should ever live. The honest truth is somebody has $1 million in the bank, they are not going to choose and stay in one of these places. It is just not a thing that does not happen. And so we want people to be able to hold on to whatever limited savings they might have. So this is a suggestion, and we can easily have Katie remove it. And the final one, someone mentioned it to me, so I said to reduce for Katie. She added it in, and we can just as easily take it out and discuss it in H91.
So that would be my recommendation, because that's a significant change in the program. And we're trying to,
$100.
pardon me?
My brother, the nursing home will call and say to my sister, you need to put that in your account. They don't take it away from
Different
them.
programs have different rules around that amount. For
But
the
they don't take it away from them.
Yeah.
They just call and have them put it in a family member's account or
Yeah.
something.
Well, they're being very nice, because they could, to be honest, they could take that. So, my suggestion is going to be to remove that, because we're not trying to make, that be a significant change. That's a consequential change, which, we will debate in 91 when we get to language. Okay.
Okay, D, this one, so the first sentence minus the highlighted yellow, emergency housing provided pursuant to this section shall replace the catastrophic and non-catastrophic categories adopted by the department and rule. Our chair told me that they still have those listed on the website. So this is just language to hopefully
Modify the website. Yeah.
modify the website and the materials so that people aren't getting confused by all of these different terms.
Okay.
Okay. Again, these are just
It's
changes.
continuing reporting essentially.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And done all of that, changes for years. And then the final kind of change is on the final page. The commissioner or the commissioner's designee may issue a variance to any household eligible for GA emergency housing when in the discretion of the commissioner or designee. Failing to issue a variance could create a risk of imminent and significant danger to the household members' health, safety, or well-being. One thing we heard in the task force a lot, we've heard it in here, is that the department feels that they do not have the ability to make exceptions or reasonable accommodations. And this gives them that. Just clarifies that they do in fact have that ability.
Okay, alrighty. Thank you, Jubilee. A lot of work. Okay, I should be looking at the agenda, I suppose, to see, we're not supposed to be doing anything else, are we?
No.
Okay, good. Phew,
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure. You see people coming in and out, I want to make sure. All right. All right, let's move on to language that Anne and Brenda have.
Okay.
Like that, like what you sent me,
Oh,
budget info.
that's, yeah, not for now.
No, I know, but I like it. I
Yeah.
like it.
You know, I've gotten about 50
Do you-
emails since. Could you send it to me
Some of
again?
mine are tomorrow.
Yes.
I'm trying.
Oh, okay, that helps.
So they
9:55.
all start off
Like
like
50 a day.
general, and they start off Donahue budget for.
Which, so does it have a number?
Yes, one of them is, let's see, there's 381177.
Shall we do that
version-
first or?
Version 2.
Version 2,
Version 2.
and then 381172, version 2, and 381279, version 1.
Okay, let's deal with the first one you said, supervised visitation.
Supervised
service.
visitation, yes, okay. So,
This is 2.2.
It says 2.2,
budget
oh,
proposal.
draft number 2.2, yeah.
open here, let's
It's not
see.
good.
Oh, here we go. I won't open.
Yeah, I don't know,
Stuck.
mine won't open either. There we go, okay.
You got yours? Good.
So as discussed, this is about that supervised visitation programs where, there was no way this year we could delve into the entire funding structure for supervised visitation. Right now, 5 counties have none. Other counties all get a flat amount regardless of the size. The money is split coming in from DCF at a much lower proportion when it might be more for DCF clients, but we don't know those actual numbers. The most immediate crisis this year was the loss of the $30,000 for coordination, and we're proposing to backfill that with some available money. But this is for looking ahead. We need this sorted out, and the best places to have it sorted out is from DCF and the judiciary system. And so this is asking them to report on a proposal for how to fund this in a sustainable way, both for the statewide coordination, for how to equitably fund it among the locations, and for access for residents of counties that don't currently have a coordination visitation site. Because judiciary folks, or the chief superior judge, who's the equivalent of the commissioner of an agency, weren't in any of the loop for our conversations here. We did run the language by, and the reason this is version 2 is there's some tweaks to version 1 on the request of the chief superior judge, Zone, who was otherwise supportive and willing to do this report, the work on this report. So.
People understand?
Thank you.
Is this one that we can dispel with and vote on now? That'd be great to have
Yes.
something.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, can we just see a show of hands for people who are supportive of the language? Okay, great. Whew, phew, thank you. right.
So the next one, it's a real easy one, the facility planning. Says facility planning for justice involved youth. I can just explain.
DCF.
It's changing 2025 to 2027.
Oh, I'm gonna need to see that in writing.
So back 2 years ago, we established a stakeholder working group to ensure that there was broad input into the planning for both the temporary youth facility, which is Red Clover, but also for the long term. That's still very much in development, in discussion, And what this is saying is the stakeholder working group has to continue to exist. The work isn't done, so it's extending it for another 2 years by changing the date from 2025 to 2027, June.
So I'm gonna ask Ann, when we're done with this, that you send me all your language in one email.
Will do.
Thank you.
And I can copy that to everybody, so you have it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I
on file.
can't find this one, but
I actually have one email with all your language, but I don't know if it's the most recent one.
one email from
I
Ann?
have one email from Ann.
With the three, I had,
That was from Wednesday at 8:40 a.m.
that should
That
be.
has all three people.
It may not-
Worksheet.
It may not
and
have the updated, on the,
Judge
on
Sonia's
the visit
language.
with Judge Zone
Yeah.
language incorporated. So-
Okay, so what this we had instituted an advisory committee because of we believe that people in addition to the department should be involved in this decision-making process around services for youth with justice involvement. So just extending it. Anybody have any issues with that? We okay with extending that for another 2 years? All right, let's see a thumbs up just to make sure that I'm not inferring. Okay, great.
And lots.
Hands, thumbs, thumbs, anyway. Okay, Ann.
So the third one is 381172, version 2, says Donahue budget proposal, budgetary inflation, direct services. And this is the language that would set out what I talked about before, is that kind of for everything, not just our budget part, but for all of everything under our committee hat, that we request that we get the figure from the departments per 1%, what it would cost for that adjustment for all of the community contracted direct service providers, both Dale and DCF, so that we have that information instead of trying to, every year trying to dig out, well, what if we did 4% or for, what for this group or this group? We don't even know all of the different provider groups, and it's really uncomfortable when we say this one should get this increase and we don't even know what others might be
That we're missing.
we're missing. And so this would be requiring the departments to simply give us that figure for informational. Then, of course, you can, that much math we can probably do. If we decide it should be 2%, we can double the 1%.
I think we could probably do that much now.
Even I. So that's just asking for that baseline of information each year.
Doesn't commit us to doing anything. It's
nope.
just information. And it really honestly is something that should be submitted with the governor's recommended budget each year.
This is right, as part of the budget presentation.
Yes, it is. It is
Yeah.
something that that both of these departments calculate every year because we ask them for it every year. So
We can
are there any?
get it up front.
Yes. Are there any issues or questions about this? Okay, can I see a show of hands supporting this language? Great. All right. You got the most votes so far.
So conservative.
Okay, that's it for your language, right?
Yep. And
Okay.
I'm gonna forward it in one
In one
email to
email.
you.
I love that. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Okay. Health Department, do you have
One
language?
piece of language.
Okay,
Yeah.
just send to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just send to us. Go for
I
it.
did send it on it. Yeah,
You sent it
Could be.
previously, probably.
yeah, I can be very, very brief. Ultimately, overall, this is pretty much the same exact language as in FY 2025 budget, which was redrafted by this committee last year to streamline the AIDS funding. So in section 1 adds the RFP process. That is how the funds are now being distributed. And the governor's, he combined the 295,000 that goes to the 3 ASOs for HIV services and harm reduction services, with the $400,000 that goes to the multiple organizations for a total of $695,000. what this language that I'm proposing does, like in FY 25, is separating the $295,000 in section 2 and the 400,000 in 4, because while there is an overlap in who gets the funds, different organizations can get the funds. So the two pots of money, the 295 and the 400,000, need to be in separate sections. And 4, like in FY 25, sets a date by which the funds need to be distributed. So there's no adding of any type of funds. It's just kind of more of a clarification and a separation. That way the agencies that can utilize can access these funds.
I feel like I'm missing something.
If you were referencing 400,000, I see a reference to.
I don't see 400,000. I see 475.
475 maybe is.
The 695,000 is broken into 295,000 and 400,000. So simply put, because the 295,000 goes to 3 specific organizations, and the 400 to the is open to more organizations. The two amounts cannot be combined. So there's 2 amounts in there. One for
Do you see 400 written in?
oh, it's a 475. Sorry,
Okay.
sorry.
I have just one question, Eric, and in section 4, I just because it's a year, is that year 2024 need to be updated, or is that referring something that happened in 2024?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
In other words, there was a previous attempt to reduce.
Yeah.
And we said that they can't go below levels for 2024.
All right. Good.
Anybody have any questions about that? This is, it's not for people who are unfamiliar to looking at language. It's not adding something to the governor's budget. It's just saying how the money that is in the governor's budget will be divided up between these organizations. Any questions?
And it's in the budget, right?
Okay, can I see a hands up?
Just give me a minute.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I want to read it again.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Is there a base on top of this?
This is the base. This is it.
No money added, nothing, just
There's-
clarification,
just Clarification.
just language clarification.
Okay.
Ready when you are.
Okay, thanks. And just to be clear, this is language that's in the budget every year.
Okay,
It's just being updated really.
thanks.
Everybody who is in favor of this language, just a thumbs up, hands up, whatever you want to say. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, do you have any language?
Nope.
No language. We've looked at your language. We've looked at your language.
We haven't talked about Dale language.
We haven't talked to, that's the last.
So this is, do you want me to talk about it? I don't know if we sent it out.
And I didn't know if you had changed,
I do.
recommended change. Did you get it to Katie? I haven't seen any
No,
recommended changes.
I don't have any proposed by Katie, but it's just basically, when we run through what it is with everybody, or I can.
I haven't sent it out and hold on just a second.
Because, yeah, it needs some.
Yeah, I figured that it did. That's why I sent it to you for. Let's see here. No, that's not it.
You want me to send it to you?
Yeah, I've got, yeah, thank you.
I found it.
You sent it to all of us?
Yeah,
How do you want me to
yeah,
send it to
yeah,
everybody?
send it to everybody. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. My thing will put the address in. Okay.
Coming your way shortly. Here we go.
Got it.
Quiet, I know, right?
Okay. So what the concern was that this language would do is each year since the pandemic, a lot of our nursing homes have been on, our skilled nursing facilities have had to really rely on travelers and to rely on their staff, which basically make up a nursing home, in order to keep their doors open or to meet the requirements of running a nursing home. And this pressure, these added costs have had to have them come back to the state and ask for extraordinary financial relief. So we saw in our budget adjustment, there was about 21 million. We've seen that before, previous budgets. And really what we want to do is understand why and have a better ability to look at and try to get out in front of this so that we're not constantly having to pick this up each year during the budget adjustment. I got a ton of information since we received this, and a lot of it has to do with the payer mix that many of these skilled nursing facilities have. So who's coming to receive services there? It's also, we're seeing a lot more acuity. So people that are ending up needing nursing home level of care are requiring a great deal of services in order to be there. Thank modern medicine for keeping people alive. So what we want to do is get information from the department on an ongoing basis or quarterly or some sort of reports back to this committee so that we just don't end up with the bill. So that we can say, look, the payer mix was this at a particular facility that was asking for extraordinary financial release, or, this particular facility, these are the contributing factors to why they're in this situation, so that there's a possibility that maybe we could get out in front of it and get to them before, because they really need to be pretty dire straits to be able to get this level of support from us. And it's a lot of money. And so having the data would be really helpful as we try to assess how to keep these facilities open, because they're important to our communities, especially to the individuals that are there. But they also use a lot of money. And if there's an opportunity for us to get out in front of it and to be able to provide more resources to our home and community-based providers, keep people in their homes, that's a kind of a win.
So I'm just going to provide a little bit of
Yeah.
background for people who might not know about how the Choices for Care program is structured. So Choices for Care is our overall program for older Vermonters and individuals with disabilities who require Medicaid funding for their supports and services. The thing about Choices for Care, which is, I don't know where it stands in the rest of the country now, but when Vermont did it, it was unique.
We were way out.
We were way out in front. But because Medicaid only previously paid, so low-income individuals only previously paid for nursing facility services, the most costly end of our service system. Vermont, way back when, now we're closing in on 30 years ago now, we were very innovative and said, wait, it doesn't make sense for us to pay only for the most costly part of the service system. Needs to be part of the continuum. But maybe we can reduce the amount that we are utilizing nursing facilities by assisting people to stay in their own homes and communities and receive support there, and have that be funded by Medicaid if they're already eligible for Medicaid. So this has been a very successful program over these years. And so the interesting thing about this is that all of those are funded under one appropriation. Okay, so the nursing facility, which is at the one end of the spectrum. And then, things like homemaker and personal care for eligible people at the other end of the spectrum, adult day, that's part of the Choices for Care program, all, at the lower cost of the spectrum. And so because it's all one budget, it means that there is this sort of like tension, if you will, between the institution-based services of nursing facilities and the home and community-based services. And as we talked about earlier, nursing facilities are the only entity that has regular rate reviews every year. We will see something in our budget, and then periodically there's what they call a rebasing. And so this, I guess I would call it a more intensive review, and it rebases everything. And then in the last several years, we've seen a lot of extraordinary financial relief. Again, it's the only entity in our service system that gets extraordinary financial relief in regulation right now. And so what this is intended to do is to help us understand more about those pressures and why are we getting those pressures. And, for instance, there's been a heavy reliance in a number of different levels of positions on travelers. So nursing, on LNAs, on some of the other services. There's been pressure. Last year, we put money in the budget for medical directors because there's been pressure to, find and have sufficient medical directors for nursing facilities, all of which are required by regulation. So what this is an attempt to do is to say, we really kind of need to dig into this a little bit deeper, and we need to have more information. And we need to understand that impact. And I'm just going to be honest about this and blunt about it, because every dollar we spend in the highest cost service, we don't get to spend in the lower cost services. We need all of them. Okay. And they're all in one budget. And we had some discussion last year, honestly, about whether we should divide out nursing facilities, in the long-term care budget from the rest of Choices for Care. Decided not to at that point in time. The department convinced us not to do it, but, it's still a question that's out there. But this will provide us with additional information. And go. Just want to provide that background.
Yeah, no, it's super helpful. And just to throw some numbers at, like the statutory increase, along with looking at what they call rebasing, or looking at the rates in the proposed budget, the governor's recommend was 15.3 million. So that's increasing the base to these providers.
And we just in BAA approved.
Yes, we just approved
40 something million.
Correct, which is the utilization rate, which is in the base, which Chair asked me to put in our budget, so I'll get that in there. A lot of this has to do with the reimbursement rate that we're providing these facilities to be able to operate. You hear on the radio, call me and I'll protect these are attorneys advertising, I'll protect your assets from the nursing. So people rely on us to provide those reimbursement rates to these businesses because they've hid their money. You can hear it on the radio.
Yeah, I know. That's complicating the issue, I think, Dana. I'm sure you
And we have loopholes that we have in Vermont that like only 3 other states in the country have those loopholes. And
Yeah.
we
So
have
I'm
been
just-
willing to close the loopholes. So we are permitting that. We are choosing to permit that. Just
Well, maybe we shouldn't.
maybe we shouldn't.
Just hear, I mean, I
Yeah.
hear them on the radio and that
Bringing that up, so
I know,
I
know.
gotta respond.
I hear you. I hear you.
I
All
know,
right,
it's a
time
different
out
issue.
for both of you, time out for both of you. Different issue. It complicates the conversation that we don't need to do right now. The other thing that we have, and it varies from home to home, is what we call the payer mix. Okay, so the payer mix between facilities that have more Medicaid recipients. This is only Medicaid. Remember, this is not private pay.
Correct.
Or insurance-based. And remember, nursing facilities provide not only long-term care, but rehabilitation care as well. And there's different rates paid for different services.
Paid, Medicare,
And,
private pay.
right, and different,
Insurance.
right, Medicare is a big payer in nursing homes as well. So this is really an effort to try to help us understand better these pressures, because honestly, we can't really afford to continue what we're doing. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there on the table. Right now, it's coming at the expense of community-based providers. And it's one of the reasons we did H13, because there is no mechanism for rate reviews for home and community-based services. And kudos to whoever years and years ago, I don't know, I was long before my time. I don't know if it was before your time or not, Anne, but put in a rate review and methodology in statute for skilled nursing facilities. So, which frankly, we should just have for all services and what we're trying to do. Did you, so we have the language that you just forwarded. Do you
Yeah.
have
I
recommendations?
mean, I don't think that we
amendments?
should say that we're not gonna pay out.
You're not interested in a
No.
moratorium?
I am
Thank you.
not. Because
That's a
it would
scary
be-
first sentence.
It
Yeah,
would be
that's-
so hard to pick them up if one went out of business.
Right.
I think
Can't
that we
just-
need to really look at what the causes are and see how we can try to get out in front of it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's gonna probably be much like many other in the home and community-based realm, that our reimbursement rate from our Medicaid providers, from the Medicaid reimbursement rate is low, to be able to provide these services, as we're trying to get a lot of them even up to 23 rates. So, anyways, I would recommend.
Do you have other language?
Yeah, I
Dan?
mean, I just want to see a payer mix, like what, so if a facility comes in, what is their payer mix? And because I don't have, a lot of information, I don't know if it's a good idea to put something really open-ended, but other pertinent information to why this entity is applying, like, is it a natural, did it flood? Who knows, right? So there's other information outside of the couple bullet points that we put in here, that could have caused
What's your
them.
proposal?
So just basically to take that out, pretty much everything we've had in here, include pair mix, and then some kind of an open-ended question that would be kind of a catch-all to how they ended up requiring this, if it's not something that.
Isn't that the reason extraordinary financial relief was sought and awarded?
Yeah, but I want to know what those reasons are. So
Well,
we
that's in there
basically
already.
It says the
say,
reason.
right, the reason, okay, fair enough.
Well, no, I mean, if you want to give examples there that,
Yeah,
Could I unless I misunderstand, could I recommend, it seems to me that letter D is two questions.
Mhm.
One, and I would recommend having a D and an E,
mhm.
why it's sought
Sought
and why it was
and why
awarded.
awarded.
Yes, okay, that kind of gets to
does that
what I
get
was
to what
talking
you were
about,
thinking about?
yes.
Okay.
Yep,
And maybe make it clear, the reasons, just to make it clear.
The reason,
There may be more
Because
than
there
one.
may be
Don't
more
put-
than
put-
one.
Don't put it as one big
Sure.
bulk piece.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Is there an application that a facility
Yes.
must file? And does that application give criteria? You must meet one of, 3 of the following 7 criteria to be eligible to apply. I mean, if they have criteria, can we ask them just to share how many are using which
Yeah,
criteria?
I don't know off the top of my head, but this is contained in rule.
It's
So
enrollment.
there are formal rules around what can be submitted. It's the only part of the long-term care system that has this provision.
Yeah.
So you could probably find on the Dale website, what the rules are that might be
I can forward
on,
them. I have them.
Diva, you have them?
Mhm.
Okay. I just don't know off the top of my
Well,
head.
I guess I'm asking more generally, would that help us inform what information we are seeking if we know what's available?
In the rules, it doesn't lay out exactly what information. There's no form or anything like that.
And the only other question I had about this, and I'm glad you now recommending we strike A. If we were going to move forward with that or want to consider anything else, is there a definition to extraordinary that we can amend? Or anything we could,
Oh, you mean, it's,
so rather than removing the opportunity for anyone to apply for extraordinary
No,
financial.
Dan is
No.
suggesting that that be
Not
eliminated.
include that.
we're not including.
No, I'll be clear. This is my language.
Okay.
I think you had your hand first and then Ray.
So as a possible other addition, just because I think as you referenced, it is an issue lurking there. It might be useful, very valuable background for future legislative consideration. The extent, if known, to which
Like,
the hiding of assets.
yes, well, I think that
It's a
might come in
clause.
in the payer mix. Like, you're seeing more Medicaid
But you don't know
versus
why they, yeah.
private pay versus, long-term care insurance.
Right.
Which would be private insurance.
Excuse me, but with that payer mix, does it fluctuate during the year? Would you need to like put a date on this date, your payer mix? But I don't know. Again, I just don't know.
Yeah, but they have, Jen, they can
There's a
tell you like
last for the
overall in
year.
the fiscal year,
We're
yeah.
interested in the ones that are coming asking for help.
Yes, no, I understand that. Yeah.
So what's their payer mix? What's their,
And they could, that means
They know
something.
that
They
means
wouldn't
something.
say- Yeah, okay, all right. Just don't know this stuff.
I'm just, you just said that, Dan, and I'm not sure we're only interested in the ones asking for help. Because, I'm just,
Yeah.
that just
no,
prompted
They
a
all
thought for me.
received the inflationary increase.
Right, I'm
every
just-
year.
I'm trying to figure out, maybe, having information about those who have not sought financial relief might help us to better understand the differences between
Right,
those
ones that
and the
are-
ones that
are-
are.
operating
A healthy mix.
Yeah,
And I did get some information that the nonprofits, and I can clarify, I can double check this, but that there's for-profit and nonprofit,
mhm.
and some don't take Medicaid,
Yeah, not very many.
right?
Um,
So they are looking for that payer mix that's gonna keep the lights on.
Right. So, I mean, so payer mix is, I think, something that we should add to
Yeah,
this list. of
Absolutely, got it
things.
on my list.
Payer mix, and I think we should be, let's spend a little bit more time
Okay,
thinking about the criteria that we would want in a report.
Sure.
Back to us, because they will only give us what exactly we
What we
asked for. So I think it's,
and yeah, and I want to be like, what are we gonna do with the information? Like, I can't read all the reports, so, a shorter report with really important information is gonna be more useful to me.
well, and
Asking for a ton of information that,
I would suggest that we talk about a presentation, which is what we have done in some
Yeah, no,
some
that would
bills,
be
that there
really
would be
good.
a presentation provided.
Yeah.
And then it's more digestible information.
I agree.
Frankly, so maybe we should think
Or,
about that.
yeah,
So I'm
Mhm.
going to ask that you and Todd go back, and I'll get to you in a second. I'm going to ask that you and Todd go back and think about a
Mhm.
little bit of a reworking
Sure.
of this. Thinking about a presentation, it'd probably be from the Division of Rate Setting.
Mhm.
And or Dale, rate setting is the one who does this review. Are there particular things, like I think payer mix is important to
Mhm.
understand. I think that,
staffing level, like staffing, are they relying on travelers because we
what
don't have the
what
workforce?
positions- Well, I don't know. People are being
Vacancies.
able to figure that out now,
Yeah.
they're
We're not-
increasing wages.
But if we're not giving them enough money,
Yeah, you're going to be hard pressed to convince me of that, Dan.
Workforce.
I'm telling you. Pressed to convince me of that one. All right, think about
sure.
the questions a little bit more. Ray?
I'm thinking about this, and I don't know if it belongs here, but I need to say it, is that I don't know if there's any way to determine who of this population would qualify for and not need nursing home level care if we fund the home and community-based services better, because what I fear is in 5 years, kind of given the demographics, and that might be the reality, that we might need both. So really understanding, like, are we needing to invest all this money? Because our rationale is, rightly, our hypothesis is that if we invest more in home and community-based services, we will reduce the need for nursing home level care because it's the highest cost care. but what if we actually need both? Or you know what I mean? So how do
We
we
do need
find?
both.
There's,
We do need
We know,
both,
but how much? The growth.
how
Right.
much, right? Will we need to increase both at the rates that we have been doing? So I don't know how we can determine. How can we get
Demographic
data to get
projections,
that,
yeah.
right? With our demographic projections, we may be headed there. So how do we get at
there's
that?
very specific criteria to be able to be in a nursing home. So people have to, it's, an assessment is made by like this nurse or somebody, that, has certain criteria. So you might get to a point while you're at the nursing home, maybe you're coming in because you had a stroke, right? And then you start to not need skilled level, that highest level of care. You're not there anymore. They can't, you have to move. You have to go someplace else.
Well, there's a difference between rehab
Correct.
and long-term
Yeah,
care.
uh-huh.
Correct.
There's a difference in criteria.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
you might find that there's individuals going back and forth between needing skilled level nursing of care and then providing home and community-based care where they go back to their home, right? And then get to a point, so the question is I think it's a harder question to answer because if you're not providing the care in home, do they get to a point that they need to receive
Right.
nursing home level of care? And then once they're in there, do they get care that puts them back into their home?
Yeah, I mean, there's what that's really talking about is really the whole concept of choices for care.
Mhm, sure.
And how it was designed and what happens once you're in a nursing home. Do you get assistance to get out of the nursing home? Certainly people who don't meet nursing level of care anymore are, there are discharge planners and
Yeah.
hopefully they're working with folks in the community to
Yep.
provide the supports that are necessary there. But I just want to make sure that people understand that the concept of this is it is one budget. So what we spend on the highest end of cost means that we don't have it available to spend on the preventive, lower end, lower cost services that most people prefer. And so that's why it's really important for us to really understand this because a higher percentage of what we're spending on long-term care is going into nursing facility services. There's a shift that's happening and, part of it, people can hypothesize that shift is happening because we have not been supporting the community-based services because they don't have what we've passed out in H13, which is a regular review of rates and a determination about how we pay for those. So it's complicated and it's all about individual choice about where they want to receive their services. But if we are not funding the whole system at sufficient levels, then it really doesn't end up being a choice.
Right.
It really ends up being a necessity to choose,
Sure.
one thing over another.
So, yeah, and so I'll come back with some criteria that we want for like this report, we can get the full applications from its public record.
Yeah.
But that's not gonna do us much good,
No,
but we
no.
need to have that, and I like your idea about a presentation.
Yeah.
And what that looks like, so.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll make that happen.
Alrighty. All right. So, are people in general support for this concept? We'll have different language. I'm not asking you to vote on the language, but, yeah, go ahead.
Just quickly for
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah.
No money, really just looking for a
Correct.
report, looking for data.
Yeah.
Looking for information to make an informative decision.
Yes.
Thank you.
And this is all data that they have. It's a matter of presenting it in ways that we can access.
Yeah, I got lost after the analogy you used.
Sorry.
Bad analogy.
Yeah. Okay. Did I miss any language?
You finished with Jubilees?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, just so people know what we're going to do, we are not going to be talking about emergency shelter program at 1:00. We are going to be talking about budget. And in the meantime, I know you're going to be having lots of fun about this budget. Yeah, just to let you know that.
All right.
Thank you.